All right, so we should start the part two. Uh, the part two is about cost leadership as well. So the definition of a cost leader, which means that a cost leader provides a product of acceptable value. So which means that it meets the minimum industry standard at the lowest cost. So it is an internal, process-driven strategy focused on the supply side as well. Um, this is so classic and academic. So when many students hear and read this sentence, the major number of students not get it, unfortunately. So I'm gonna explain more deeply about the definition of the cost leader as well. The first, before going to deep into about the cost leadership definition, so you guys must recognize that cost leadership means that not cheap, but meticulously efficient. So the object of a cost leadership strategy is leadership is to produce goods or services. Okay, so this is so important key concept because many students, many people hear the cost leadership, so many people think that the cheap and make the products cut the cost is the most important, but of course these key terms are also important, but most important point is that to produce goods or services. But not only for that, with what? A level of perceived value that is acceptable to the broad market. Okay? Uh, it's not enough. Of course, at a lower total cost than any competitor in the industry. So, ladies and gentlemen, must memorize that the objective of cost leadership is that to produce goods or services not only for the provided goods and services with not a cheap price, is with a level of of the perceived value and acceptable to the broader market. So these two words are the important key terms. So I would like to say one more again. I need to stress something that students constantly misunderstand at this stage of their education. So cost leadership does not mean low quality. No, okay? So this is one of the most costly confusion in strategic practice as well. So we assume that if you produce a product that breaks after one use, the customer's willingness to pay, so willing to pay, which means that we already study with the VPC key terms. So willingness to pay V collapse toward zero. So and the VC gap, so that defines your advantage disappears entirely. So a true cost leader provides a product that is standard, functional, or good enough. Provides what? A product that is standard, functional, or good enough. So one that meets all core customer requirements but has been ruthlessly stripped of all expensive extras that the mass market customer does not sufficiently value to justify the added cost. So we consider Walmart. Maybe I already uploaded the Walmart case. So must 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 watch that case video and think about many situations as well. Anyway, so consider the Walmart. The shopping experience is not glamorous. Up stage, where is it? Right? Have you ever been to Walmart in the US? The shopping experience experiment is not mhm, not good as well. I have a lot of some stories about Walmart. I'm gonna tell you later. The stores are enormous and utilitarian. So the customer service is basic. I'm gonna just see as customer service, basic. But the products are rare, branded, and exactly what was advertised. So Walmart wins one price because its entire operating system, so from suppliers relationships to inventory management to store layout to employee scheduling, they has been engineered to minimize the cost at every single node. Okay? So Walmart case is the really good example about the cost leadership case. So that's the philosophy. Okay, I hope understand it. And one more mention it. The historical origin, the intellectual origin of a cost leader strategy can be traced to Frederick Winslow Taylor's Scientific Management in 1911 and Harry Ford mass production system at the Highland Park plant. And the Ford's moving assembly line reduced the time to build a Model T from 12.5 hours to 93 minutes. So this was not a product innovation. It was a process innovation that delivered a previously unimaginable cost structure. So cost leadership has been the dominant competitive weapon in mass manufacturing ever since. Okay? Yeah, it's enough to explain the first po- part for the cost leadership, and we should move to the next thing with the four pillars of sustainable cost advantage as well. So to build a cost structure that makes the competitors genuinely afraid. So you must master four distinct drivers of cost advantage. So these are not simple tactics, of course. So each one represents a deep strategic commitment as well. The first pillar um, is that superior access to input factors, a lower cost input factor as well. So the most basic level of cost advantage is securing structurally cheaper access to the key inputs of your business. So the raw materials, labors, capital, and technology or proprietary processes, of course, IT services as well. And this is not merely a matter of negotiating harder. It requires building structural, often irreversible advantages as well. The good example is that monopsony power. Um, the example is large firms like Walmart and Amazon, or Toyota exercises mon- monopsony power. So the buyer side equivalent of a monopoly. So when you are the world's largest buyer of a particular input, you can essentially dictate the price and terms to suppliers because they have no comparably sized alternative customer. So this advantage compounds with scale as well. And also has geographic advantages. Geographic advantages. The firms that locate production in regions with structurally lower labor cost, energy cost, or regulatory burden gain a cost advantage that is difficult for incumbents to replicate without dismantling their existing operations. And also is a proprietary technology or process patents, access to proprietary manufacturing process, algorithm, or formula that competitor cannot legally replicate creates a durable input cost advantage as well. A good example is that CEMX, the Mexican cement company, the built dominant cost positions in emerging markets by acquiring local limestone and power plants. So controlling its two largest input cost drivers before competitors even recognize the opportunity as well. Okay, good. And the second pillar is the economies of scale. So the mathematics of mass production. So economics of scale describe the reduction in per unit cost that occurs as the total volume of production increases. Describe the reduction. I'm gonna write it for you. The reduction in per unit cost that occurs as the total volume of production increases. So this is one of the most powerful and well documented phenomena in all of economics. It operates through three distinct mechanisms as well. The first mechanism is the fixed cost spreading, the physical proprietary specialization as well. So I'm gonna explain more things with the new pages because this is really important and interesting and really basic. As I explained in previous slides, economic standard scale, economics of scale has three distinct mechanisms. Three distinct mechanism. The first mechanism is that spreading fixed cost. Spreading fixed cost as well. The fixed cost, capital expenditure on factories, technology, platforms, R&D, and brand advertising. So fixed cost, I'm gonna write it FC, are independent of output volume. Independent of output volume. So they must be paid whether you produce 1 unit or 1 billion units. The larger your output, the more units over which these fixed costs are spread. Okay, so the larger output, what? The fixed costs are spread. So for example, the Amazon, this is just assuming, not a real case. So Amazon invest $20 billion in its cloud infrastructure. That invest costs $20 per unit if you have 1 billion units of usage, which means that 20 per dollars per unit if you have 1 billion units of usage. So or $0.02 per unit if you have 1 trillion. Okay, this is the example. And the second thing is the specialization and the division of labor. Specialization and division of labor. Okay, so Adam Smith, the legendary pin factory example in the West of nations. 국부론 in Korean. So remains the most lucid exposition of this mechanism. So when production volume is low, each worker must perform many tasks and constantly switch context. So each worker must perform many tasks and constantly switch context. So at scale, each task can be assigned to a dedicated specialist who performs only that action all day. So the result is dramatically faster cycle time and fewer errors and lower unit cost. Fascinating, right? Oops, make the new page. And last mechanisms is that minimum efficient scale, minimum efficient scale, MES. So every industry has a volume threshold below. So I'm gonna write them some graphs for you guys. I'm gonna write the one graph for you guys. The font size small, 100K units. Next column is the fixed cost per unit. And next column is a variable cost. Every cost is the per unit. Okay, so total cost. This column is that implication. So in a small size firm, fixed cost per unit is quite expensive because this is quite small. The variable cost almost similar. Total cost this one. And medium 1 million units. Fixed cost is 10. Variable cost is similar. Total cost is just 60. And a large firm produce 1 million units. The fixed cost is 1. Variable cost is 50. Total cost is 51. So it's good. And two large, it's a 50 million units. The fixed cost is the zero point 0.2. The variable cost is 58 .2. Okay, so this is the example of the MES table. Okay, so which average costs are on competitive high and above which further scale gains become marginal. So managers must identify their industry's MES minimum efficient scale and achieve it to remain viable. So however, and this is critical, so growing beyond the optimal scale brings this economies of scale. So bureaucratic overhead communication failures, coordination complexity, and marginal managerial span of control limitation begin pushing unit cost back up. So finding the sweet spot is a dynamic management challenge. Okay, so this case, this table case, so which one is the most interesting and the best choice? Is maybe this one, large company. The total cost is $51. This is cost leadership, right? Then, second, medium is near MES. And the small company, not considered. The two large, of course, the total cost is lower than medium-sized company. But as I explained before, the two large company has this economies of scale. So bureaucratic overhead, communication failure, coordination complexity like that. So if you are the manager to choose the good strategy for the surviving, large scale large scale company is the best choice. A second option is a medium maybe. Of course, too large it's better than small, and also total cost is lower than medium size, but the medium is the second option maybe. But all strategy choices not a perfect choice because depends on the situation. Sometimes too large company is better than medium size, and small size company absolutely better than a large company sometimes. So it depends on the situation. You must consider the all situational things, all optional information. So choose the best strategy in your organization and in your life. Okay, this is all things about the second pillars. And third pillar is that learning curve effect. The human capital as a cost driver, of course. So the learning curve effect captures one of the most powerful and counterintuitive insights in operations management. As workers accumulate experience performing a task, their productivity improves and their errors rates decline, so reducing the cost per unit without any capital investment or process change. This is a uniquely human driver of competitive advantage. The most famous empirical expression of this is the 80% learning curve as well. Uh, okay. So 80% learning curve originally observed in the US aerospace industry. The rule states every time the cumulative volume of units produced doubles, the labor hours required to produce each unit fall to 80% of the previous level. So this creates a compounding dynamic advantage for the first mover. So I'm gonna write it for you guys. Open a new page. 80% learning curve. Example. If building uh, the first aircraft, carrier requires 10,000 labor hours. We assume that. Okay. per unit. Then, second cumulative unit is 8,000 hours, 80%. The fourth cumulative unit is what? Can you calculate? It's a really basic mathematics. 6,400 hours. Because this results from the second cumulative units, 80% of 8,000. Easy, right? 8, 5,120 hours from this result. Then 16th, 4,096 hours from this. So a competitor entering the market later cannot replicate this accumulated learning simply by building a factory. So they must climb the curve through the actual production experience, which takes years and bleeds the cash. The learning curve creates a structural first mover advantage that is deeply embedded in human capital rather than physical assets. So here is a strategic implication. The coastal leader should aggressively pursue early market share not merely for revenue, but to accelerate organizational learning and build a learning curve advantage that raises the cost imitation. So this is the strategy Intel pursued in microprocessor as Samsung in memory chips. Okay. The last pillar is the experience curve effect, 경험 곡선 효과, so systemic process innovation. So while the learning curve is driven by the accumulation of individual human skill, the experience curve effect is broader, much broader. So more transformational concepts. So it encompasses not only learning but also process innovation, technological substitution, redesign of product architecture, and the structural improvement of the firm's entire operating system over time. So the Boston Consulting Group (BCG) documented the experience curve in the 1960s and 1970s through extensive empirical research across the industry, including chemicals, electronics, and manufacturing. In their finding, for every doubling of the total accumulated production experience, the total cost, adjusted for inflation, declined by 20 to 30%. Uh, I forget to write it. Okay. So due to a combination of learning, scale, specialization, and technological improvement. So critically, the experience curve does not merely move a firm down a single cost curve. The breakthrough process innovation, such as Toyota's invention of the Toyota Production System, just-in-time JIT manufacturing, JIT, Amazon development of its fulfillment robotic networks, or Tesla Gigafactory automation is the good example for it. The move of firm to an entirely new, structurally lower cost curve. This is step change in competitive position as well. Okay, so this is all things of the four pillars of cost advantage. It's a bit tricky and but really important to memorize. As many students already know that this part is perfect information and perfect type for the making multiple choice questions as well. So try to understand, try to study. If you don't understand, just ask me on the system. So we take a break first. Let's take a break.